Could a new trade war make your groceries even more expensive? Could your job be at risk? In early February 2025, trade tensions between the United States and Canada flared as President Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs, citing concerns over illegal immigration and the influx of fentanyl into the U.S. Trump declared a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, with a reduced 10% tariff specifically on Canadian energy products. These measures were set to take effect on February 4th, 2025. Beyond tariffs, Canada has also sought to reinforce its domestic industries and explore alternative economic partnerships. The government has introduced subsidy programs to support sectors heavily affected by the tariffs, including agriculture and manufacturing. Additionally, officials are fast-tracking negotiations with European and Asian markets to offset potential losses from U.S. trade restrictions. Canada is also considering enhancing infrastructure projects, such as expanding port facilities in British Columbia, to streamline exports to international buyers. These measures demonstrate a broader strategy to insulate the economy from external pressure and establish a more self-sufficient trade policy. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau retaliated by imposing a 25% duty on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods starting the same day, with plans to extend tariffs to an additional $125 billion of U.S. products after a 21-day public consultation. The targeted products included American beer, wine, bourbon, fruits, fruit juices, clothing, sports equipment, and household appliances. Canadian officials suggested these tariffs were carefully chosen to impact U.S. industries with political influence, increasing pressure on Washington to reconsider its stance. After high-level talks, both nations agreed to delay implementation for 30 days. Canada committed to strengthening border security, appointing a fentanyl czar, and forming a joint strike force with the U.S. to combat drug trafficking. Some of these measures had been previously discussed, but were now formalized in direct response to the tariffs. However, despite the temporary pause, concerns persist. Economists warn that these tariffs could drive up prices on essential goods, disrupt supply chains, and strain the long-standing U.S. Canada trade relationship. How could this affect your daily expenses? If these tariffs go through, consumer prices may rise, particularly for imported foods and electronics. The cost of Canadian lumber, crucial for home building, could increase, affecting housing prices in the U.S. Auto manufacturing could also take a hit, leading to potential job losses in key sectors. In response to the uncertainty, Canada is adjusting its oil export strategies. With evolving trade dynamics and increasing demand from Asia, particularly China, Canada's energy sector is reorienting itself to lessen reliance on the U.S. Canadian pipeline operator. Trans Mountain anticipates increased demand for its pipeline system, especially if U.S. tariffs on Canadian oil are implemented. The Trans Mountain pipeline, capable of transporting 890,000 barrels per day from Alberta to Canada's Pacific coast, has been operating at approximately 80% capacity. The expansion, which became operational in May 2024, tripled the pipeline's capacity, enabling greater access to Asian markets. In September 2024, Chinese private refiner Rongsheng Petrochemical secured multiple shipments of Canadian crude. This shift signals a larger trend. Canada is actively seeking diversification in energy markets to insulate itself from unpredictable U.S. policies. What does this mean for you? If tariffs are enacted, the price of gasoline could increase, as crude oil disruptions create supply chain issues. Industries relying on Canadian raw materials, like construction, manufacturing, and agriculture, may see costs rise, potentially leading to layoffs. For example, auto manufacturers in the United States depend on Canadian steel and aluminum. Tariffs could increase production costs, potentially leading to price hikes on cars and job losses in states like Michigan and Ohio. For Canadians, tariffs on U.S. imports could mean higher prices for household staples such as fresh produce, dairy, and everyday consumer goods. Economic uncertainty might also weaken the Canadian dollar, reducing purchasing power and making international goods more expensive. Beyond retaliatory tariffs, Canada is considering alternative responses. Some policymakers advocate for strengthening trade partnerships with the European Union and Asia, particularly under the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. If tensions with the United States persist, Canada could deepen its reliance on trade deals like CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the EU, or explore joint economic initiatives with BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and other new members. There is also a growing discussion in Canada about leveraging diplomatic pressure through international trade organizations like the World Trade Organization, WTO, to challenge the tariffs. Some officials argue that the U.S. measures may violate trade agreements, providing grounds for legal retaliation. Despite its push for diversification, Canada remains deeply tied to the U.S. energy market. As of 2023, leading oil producers and their approximate daily output were the United States with 12.91 million barrels per day, or 22% of global production, Saudi Arabia with 11.13 million barrels per day, or 11%, Russia with 10.75 million barrels per day, also 11%, Canada with 5.76 million barrels per day, or 6%, and China with 5.26 million barrels per day, or 5%. With 98% of its oil exports going to the United States, Canada's economic reliance on American buyers remains a major vulnerability. The push for alternative markets in Asia highlights a strategic shift, but how quickly Canada can reduce this dependence remains uncertain. Tensions between the two countries are nothing new. In December 2024, Trump suggested that if tariffs harmed Canada's economy, the country might consider joining the U.S. as its 51st state. He even referred to Trudeau as Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. In January 2025, Trump doubled down on these claims, stating that Canada was a financial burden on the U.S. However, experts quickly refuted this. A trade deficit does not equate to a subsidy. It simply reflects different trade balances. Canada remains the largest energy supplier to the U.S., making its economic relationship with America mutually beneficial. Despite these claims, the presence of U.S. financial institutions in Canada is significant. The Canadian banking sector is known for its stringent regulatory framework, which ensures financial stability and consumer protection. While some restrictions exist, such as limits on foreign bank takeovers, these regulations apply to all financial entities operating within Canada, not just American institutions. Furthermore, cross-border banking operations facilitate trade and investment, with Canadian banks maintaining a strong presence in the U.S. as well. Institutions like TD Bank and RBC have expanded significantly into the U.S. market, demonstrating the intertwined nature of North American finance. Trump also claimed that U.S. banks were not allowed to operate in Canada, but this assertion was misleading. Major U.S. banks, including Citibank Canada, JP Morgan Bank Canada, and Amex Bank Canada, operate under Canadian financial regulations. Canada's financial system enforces strict regulatory requirements, but it does not prohibit American banks from entering the market. While fentanyl-related concerns are valid, the primary trafficking routes do not align with the claims used to justify trade tariffs. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, has repeatedly stated that the majority of fentanyl entering the U.S. arrives via Mexico, not Canada. Canadian authorities have implemented strict drug control measures, including enhanced border surveillance and international cooperation with U.S. agencies. Moreover, fentanyl precursors often originate in China before reaching Mexico, where cartels manufacture and smuggle the synthetic opioid into the U.S. The Canadian government has strengthened enforcement and border security to counter illicit drug flows. But the data suggests that focusing on the U.S. Canada border may not be the most effective strategy in tackling the crisis. Another justification for the tariffs was the claim that fentanyl is being smuggled from Canada into the U.S. While Canada does have domestic fentanyl production, most illicit fentanyl in the U.S. originates from Mexico, with precursor chemicals coming from China. Seizure data indicates that the majority of fentanyl is trafficked across the U.S.-Mexico border, not the northern border. The uncertainty surrounding this trade dispute raises critical questions about the future of North American economic relations. If negotiations falter, Canada may deepen its economic ties with other global partners, shifting away from its historical dependence on U.S. trade. Conversely, if a resolution is reached, will it be a temporary fix or a long-term restructuring of trade agreements? As businesses and consumers brace for potential economic shocks, one thing is certain. This standoff will shape the trajectory of U.S.-Canada relations for years to come. What do you think? Will Canada successfully pivot away from U.S. trade reliance, or will economic interdependence force a compromise? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.